Hello, and welcome to Yesterday, Today, and Forever, a virtual ministry of the Churches of Christ. It is our desire to present to the 21st century person the faith of the first century Christians. We seek unity through the acceptance of the faith that was once and for all delivered unto the saints. A system of faith, which first began to be spoken by our Lord prior to his crucifixion, and was later confirmed to the saints by the apostles and inspired writers of the New Testament. Thus a faith from yesterday, to today and into forever. Our speaker is Brian Barrett, who preaches for the church at Bear Branch, in Spurlockville, West Virginia. We encourage any and all persons interested in the faith of our fathers to open their Bibles as we search the scriptures for these eternal truths. This being the first of a new year, we are in the process of raising funds to support the works being accomplished through Yesterday, Today and Forever and Christ's Way Bible Institute in India. This past year was a success, in that we were able to build the first floor of the Family Ministry building, to open the Preachers Training Center. We purchased an additional lot adjacent to the Family Ministry Center. Christ's Way Bible Institute gained affiliation with World Video Bible School. The church also cared for our widows and orphans. Through the assistance of others, we provided food and clothing during the time of flooding when many were left to suffer. It is our prayer that this year can produce more success in the kingdom of our Christ. In order to continue this work on the scale we have, we need churches and dedicated Christians who have a love of the truth, the love of the lost, and a desire to build the kingdom, to partner with us on a monthly basis. We can accept checks and PayPal. Please make your check payable to Bear Branch Church of Christ. Missions and outreach. One-time gifts to the work are also appreciated. We need your help so that we may make accurate plans for this new year. Please tell others of our work and needs. Our mailing address will be on the bottom of the screen this evening, and a PayPal link is on our website on the mission page. Thank you, and God bless. Now,
14, and after this took place, it says, Jesus findeth him in the temple, and said unto him, Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus that had made him whole. And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. Now, I keep saying this, and I think it's important when John is referring to the Jews, many times when he just refers to the Jews, he's not talking about the whole population, but he's generally speaking about the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, many of those, the Sanhedrin, the Jews that were in charge, the Jews that for the average Jewish person of that day, one was concerned with. There's certain people that you pay attention when you're around, and you try not to cross them up. And these are the Jews that John most of the time is speaking about. It wasn't just a casual Jewish person who saw him carrying his bedroll, blanket, whatever it was. It wasn't just a casual person on the street who just looked at him and said, hey, buddy, you're not supposed to be doing that. It's the Sabbath. But these were some of the leaders. The Pharisees, especially the Jewish leaders, were very strict in their interpretation of their customs. And as I've said before, you can look into it, but the Pharisees had a big, long list of what they considered to be work. And so you were prohibited from doing that on the Sabbath day. And so later on, it's interesting as we come into today's lesson that Jesus finds the man in the temple. I wonder how long it had been since this man had had an opportunity to enter in to the temple. For 38 years, he had been lame, and he had came to the pool for many years seeking the healing that took place there. But I wonder, he didn't have anybody to let him down into the water when the water was troubled or disturbed by the angel. So if he had no one to let him down into the water, I wonder how many people helped him up into the temple. And if you look at some of the diagrams and things, there's always steps. The temple was on a mountain. You had to get up on the mountain. You had to climb up steps to get up to the plaza, the court of the Gentiles. And from there, if you wanted to get into the court where the donations and collections and things were taken, more steps. If you want to get up to the court of the men of Israel, there was more steps and more steps, and it just keeps going. And so, having been healed, one of the first places that it appears that he goes is to the temple. I hope it was because he was thankful and that he was praising God and delighted over the miracle which was performed by Jesus. And so here, this is another one of those interesting things. As I said, a miracle is a miracle. A miracle isn't some slow process. It's a miraculous thing. It literally alters the known laws of the universe. And we've talked about what would have to happen for a man who hasn't walked for 38 years to be able to just stand up, take up his bed, and take off walking. And still would think about all the steps that it would take to get up into the temple. And how would a man who had been crippled and an invalid for 38 years, how would those atrophied muscles and joints and all those be able to carry that man up into the temple under normal circumstances? It just wouldn't happen. And so this is part of what makes it a miracle. It is an act of creation or recreating muscles and joints and tendons and blood vessels, and it just goes on in order to have such a miracle as this. And so Jesus gives him time to move around. He gives him time to have been confronted, I suppose, by the Jewish leaders before he actually makes himself known directly to him as to who he was. This man healed him, but he didn't have enough time, apparently, in interacting with Jesus to really know who he was. But I would imagine going up into the temple and talking to other people along the way and praising for the miracle. Some people probably began to talk. If he was talking to people, said, well, you've probably met up with Jesus because he's the miracle worker in this place. He's one of the ones who has been performing miracles. Does anybody have any questions or comments as we open up here? So Jesus findeth him in the temple and said unto him, Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee. Now there has been, and I suppose there will be, much comments over this particular verse as to what Jesus meant when he was speaking to him. Some commentators say that this man had been involved in something that he shouldn't have many years ago, which brought about the injury that he experienced that caused him to be lame for 38 years. And therefore, when Jesus said, Thou art made whole, go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you, he is in reference to his past verses. Of course, a worse thing, of course, would be the judgment of God and being punished forever. Others do not connect his injury to an event or an act on his part. Jesus, they say, was just making what we might say a passing comment to him that now that he was whole and he had received the blessings of God, he should be grateful and should devote himself to the things of God, lest something worse than that come, which still takes us back to the judgment. So, there's really no way to fully know which one of these scenarios is correct. Excuse me, whether he had or he had not contributed to the events that led up to his being crippled. But we most certainly can appreciate the statement that Jesus made, and I kind of look at it from that standpoint. I don't know about his past life. We don't have a lot of information about that. But I think he should have been, and I think Jesus is telling him he should be very grateful, to God. And we're right back to that comment and thought again. He was the only one that Jesus healed there at the pool. Jesus could have healed all of them, but out of all the people that were there, Jesus chose him to heal. And so in that, now that he had been healed and he had received this special attention from Jesus, his life should be used for something meaningful. I don't want to say that his 38 years prior to that was a wasted life, but it would be very difficult to accomplish a whole lot at that day and age as an invalid. And so Jesus is speaking to him especially about what opportunities and privileges and blessings are being afforded to him at this time, and that he should make use of that, lest something worse. And of course, that would be the judgment. It would be a shame to have wasted, in a way, 38 years of his life as an invalid, and whatever time he had left, waste that too, without being devoted to God, and ultimately end up in judgment, losing everything. Does anybody have any comments on that statement that Jesus made to him? So then in verse 15, since the man was introduced to Jesus and now he knows who it was, the man goes back to the Jewish leaders, the Jews, and he tells them that it was Jesus which had made him whole. Right now he's under suspicion, and the Jewish leaders are kind of looking upon him as someone who's broken the Sabbath, and he knows that you can be stoned for breaking the Sabbath customs, or you can, by not keeping the Sabbath correctly, you can lose fellowship with the Jewish people. And so he's a little concerned that he's under suspicion, and so like many people, wanting to get the pressure off of him, he can go tell the Jewish leaders who it was. And so he misdirects or redirects the attention of the Jewish leaders away from himself to the one who had made him whole and had told him that it was acceptable for him to take up his bed and walk. And then verse 16 says, "And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus and sought to slay him because he had done these things on the Sabbath day." This is just another incident between Jesus and the Jewish leaders. It's one more thing to mark down. Throughout Jesus' earthly ministry, he was at first, people listened to him and followed him, but as time went along, some of the Jewish leaders began to question his views of things and how he did not always uphold the traditions of the fathers as they thought it should be. And so it's almost like they were keeping a little lists of the things that Jesus, well, he did this and he did this and he did this. You know, there were minor things that we read about when Jesus and his disciples were going through the fields on the way to the synagogue, and they were taking their hands and raking them across the heads of the wheat and, you know, rubbing some of the kernels and blowing the chaff away and eating the sort of the nuts of the wheat. And so they accused them of doing what was unlawful, which was reaping and harvesting on the Sabbath day. And so from events like that to the events like the man with the withered hand in the synagogue, you know, he was in there and they wanted to see what Jesus would do, and again interacted with them over the man with the withered hand that we read about. So there was a lot of events and things. As time went on, the Pharisees, the Jewish leaders, began to distance themselves further and further away from Jesus. Pilate, later on, when we think about the crucifixion of Jesus, Pilate recognizes that at the very basis of all that was envy. They were envious of Jesus. You know, they were probably envious of the fact, first of all, that he could heal on the Sabbath. Not that he did, but that he could. I mean, you know, while there was a group of people around, Jesus performs a miracle. The next thing you know, everybody in the synagogue's following Jesus, bringing their aunt, their uncle, their brother, their third cousin, somebody they know down the street. They're all following Jesus, hoping that somehow they could be healed, or at the very minimum, listen to his teachings. And so even Pilate recognized that envy was a big part of it. They tried to find ways that they could make him look bad among the Jewish people. And this accusation of working on the Sabbath day, breaking the Sabbath, I mean, if this man is some kind of religious leader, if he, you know, if you keep saying that you think he's the Christ, you think he's the Messiah, would the Christ or the Messiah break the Sabbath law? I mean, wouldn't the Messiah be very intent on keeping the Sabbath rather than dishonoring it, breaking it? And so that was one of the big things. This man breaks the Sabbath, and you want to acknowledge him as the Christ. And so they try to drive a wedge between him and the people. Now, if you notice, this takes place in the temple. And as I've said before, if you go up to the court of the women, that was also the court where the treasury was. So if you went from the court of the Gentiles, where everybody could meet, you go through the wall and up steps to the court of the women. And then there were more steps that you go up to the court of Israel, where the men of Israel would interact. And so this man works his way up through there till he finds some of the Jewish leaders. And all the way up into part of the temple up there is a place where the Sanhedrin met. Now, they met back in what I call and have called their little cubbyhole. Back in part of the temple where nobody was allowed to go unless you were really, really special person. The Sanhedrin had their place. And so it's easy for them, after having him tell them in the temple what's going on, to go up. In my mind, at least, I see them going into their little cubbyhole where the Sanhedrin met, where the leaders were there. The Pharisees and the Sadducees and different people that made up the Sanhedrin, who were the movers and shakers of Jewish society. And so they get back in there and they begin to conspire again how that they might use these things, and use this thing especially, in order to put Jesus to death. And so they sought to slay him. And in interacting with him, a new paragraph starts in verse 17. So in a way, to me, it looks like the man talked to the Jewish leaders. The Jewish leaders put their heads together and began to try to figure out how to use that against Jesus. And once they had kind of formulated part of their plans, they kind of come out and they find Jesus and they begin to talk to him. Jesus says, "My Father worketh hitherto, and I work." Therefore the Jews sought the more to kill him, because he not only had broken the Sabbath, but said also that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. And so another thing to write down on their little list of things. And so when they begin to question him as to why he's doing these things, what purpose would he have for telling someone to do things on the Sabbath day that was considered work. And of course, in reality, that wasn't work. This is one of those man-made fences around the Sabbath. We've talked about this before, but, the commandment was to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And there was not supposed to be any work done on the Sabbath day. It was a day of rest. And part of the reason for that was that in the land of Egypt, they had toiled without rest. And so God gave them a day of rest. Now, the word work is subject to interpretation. And so the Pharisees have this idea, well, we're not supposed to work. But then the question comes up, but what is work? And so they start building these fences. You don't do this, if you don't do this, if you don't do this. It might be fine to take up your bed and walk or carry something, Sabbath day's journey. But if you start doing that, you might do something else. And so the Jewish leaders start with a commandment, the Pharisees, and then they build a fence around it. If you don't break through that fence, you never get to where you'll violate the other. And so you just didn't do certain things, and they had a whole list of things. And so if you don't do that, you're not going to be out building a house. Now, in reality, the original idea of remembering the Sabbath day and it being a day of rest was just that. You shouldn't be out building a house. You shouldn't be out paving roads and moving rocks to pave the roads with. And you shouldn't be about your normal day-to-day work. If you're a shopkeeper, you shouldn't be in your store or your business or whatever. We can recognize that. And in a greater sense, that would be part of that. But again, we just build a fence a little bit further away, and if you don't do this, then you won't do that, and then you won't be doing this. And so that's kind of the way the Jewish leaders did it. Now, I have to say, Jesus wasn't a person that appreciated fences too well, especially when those fences in and of themselves corrupted the concept, especially when it makes someone guilty who is not. And he brought that up on many occasions. If you have an animal that falls in the well on the Sabbath day, you don't say, well, I hope he don't drown until tomorrow. At least sunset tonight, we'll get a rope and pull him out of there. Jesus said, you know what you're going to do. You're going to get that animal out of there. If you have someone that's sick on the Sabbath day, if someone's injured on the Sabbath day, you're going to call for the doctor and have the doctor come and try to heal, fix whatever the problem is. You're not going to say, man, I hope you don't bleed to death until sunset, because we can't get a doctor until then. And so if a doctor can practice medicine on the Sabbath day, if we can pull an animal out of a well, and there's lots of other things that they allowed, this man being told, just take your bedroll and go on your way. That's not breaking the Sabbath. The man had no job that we know of, no at least strenuous job, because he couldn't even hardly move himself around. So we kind of see where the issues are. And so the Pharisees, with their interpretation and their fences and all that, plus versus the purity. And this is the thing, there is what we would think of as the purity of the law, what the law said, what the law meant, and then we have various interpretations of how we apply that. And it's not the law that we divide over. We could all agree that the Jews should have remembered the Sabbath day to keep it holy. We can remember that as one of the big 10. But what constitutes work? That's a problem. If I already have a fire going, they weren't supposed to kindle fires on the Sabbath. But if I already have the fire going, can I take a log and put it on the fire after we've already started? If we start it Friday afternoon and we have firewood stacked up there, can I take a log and put it on the fire on the Sabbath without being considered to work? And this is what we get into. Is that work or not? And so the Pharisees try to answer that question with their fences. Well, that probably, and again, I don't know their exact answer right now, but, they might give you an answer like, well, if you already had the wood there and all you have to do is just pick it up and lay it on the fire, that's probably not working. But if you had to go outside and carry wood in from the outside to put beside the fire, then that would be working. And so they regulated everything that way. Most certainly, if we're chopping wood on the Sabbath day, that's working. But is carrying wood in from outside to put on a fire that's already burning work? And then if you take a log in a stack that's already there and put it on there, is that work? And so this is the way that the Pharisees regulated things. And so they had a law about all this stuff, a tradition, a custom. And so Jesus did not always meet their expectations when it come to those fences. Jesus did not always mend fences, and as a matter of fact, sometimes he tore them down. One of the things out west that was a big issue were fences, and fencing off the grazing areas and not being able to get through, and many times people would come along and cut the fences so the animals could get through to feed, and so not everybody appreciates a fence, even for the purpose that it's put up for. And many times Jesus would cut down some of those fences, and it creates issues like we see here. And so, yes.
Working for wages, working for help, somebody needs help or something.
Well, again, it's kind of hard to differentiate when depending on what you're doing, and so it's that thing that the Pharisees try to deal with. But even helping someone on the Sabbath day, the question is, what are you helping them do? If you're helping them pull an animal out of the well, that might not necessarily be considered work. But then if you're helping them carry firewood in to heat their home or cook their food, which they shouldn't, that's another issue. But, depends on what you're doing while you're helping them. And it's not even necessarily about whether you're paid or not. It's just a matter of, what exactly it is that you're doing while you're helping them. And even up into modern times, the Jewish people have had to deal with these problems, these fence lines, all of these kind of things. And you're not supposed to light a fire on the Sabbath day. We've talked about this. You're supposed to light the candles at before sunset on the Sabbath because you're not supposed to kindle a fire as part of the law. And so as time went on, we quit using candles and oil lamps and those things. We moved to electricity. When you turn on a switch, is that kindling a fire or not? I mean, what takes place inside those light bulbs? Would that be considered a fire or not? And if they're neon tubes and all these different things. So the Jewish people came up with the idea again that even turning on lights was a violation of the Sabbath law because it was kindling a fire. And so in some Jewish communities, they had the Sabbath Goyim, the Sabbath Gentile. They would hire a kid, and many kids made money literally going from house to house in the Jewish neighborhoods, and they would pay them to come to their house and turn the lights on. That way they weren't doing it. They pay the Gentile. Gentiles aren't under the law. So the little Gentile kid would come in, and we want you to turn on these lights. They would go through the house, turn on all the lights that they needed on, and they might even have them come back later and turn them back off before they got ready to go to bed. And so lots of little kids in the Jewish neighborhoods that were Gentiles made money just turning on and off lights. I've heard about people comment about they did that while they were young to make extra money. Yes?
Well, probably now, though, they got timers. They can set the timer.
Yeah, you can set the timer to come on and off. So technology runs everything, doesn't it? Even the little Gentile kids can't make a buck on the Sabbath because of technology. But this to us it seems strange, but these were major issues. I mean, it's the same thing about one cup or many cups. Classrooms, no classrooms. Eat in the building, don't eat in the building. Have a bathroom in the building, don't have a bathroom. I mean, there's always some kind of controversy that's going on that people have. And the Sabbath was one of those big areas where, it was easy to pick something out that didn't seem quite right because most people, fearing the wrath of the Pharisees, did less, not more, on the Sabbath day. They tried not to make themselves conspicuous. They didn't want to be labeled with the sinners and publicans, so they tried to stay in good graces. But interacting with Jesus, Jesus tells them, my Father worketh hitherto, that is on the Sabbath. God works on the Sabbath. God's not any different on the Sabbath day than any other day. And so God the Father works on the Sabbath day, and he says, I also work. Therefore the Jews sought the more to kill him because he not only had broken the Sabbath. Had he? Here's where the argument. They sought the more. They believing he had broken the Sabbath. Now he said that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. Now, when we look at that, we have to ask ourselves, well, if you're looking at from a human standpoint, that might be an issue, trying to claim deity for yourself. But we also know that Philippians 2, there in verse 5 and 6, tells us that when Jesus was with God before he came to earth, he thought it not robbery to be equal with God. And so, as we see in John 1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And so there, if you understand in reality, Jesus was God. And again, just like any other day, the Sabbath was not made for God. God made the Sabbath for man. And nonetheless, Jesus didn't break the Sabbath, but he broke the traditions and the customs of men, and that created a problem. Then answered Jesus and said to them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, the Son can do nothing of himself, but what he seeth the Father do, For what things soever he doeth, these also doeth the Son likewise. And so his discussion and his acknowledgement of being the Son of God, as well as being God. A lot of people, I don't know where they get this, but I see people arguing on the internet all the time about, did Jesus ever say that he was God? Right there it is. And there's lots of more places, but the Jewish leaders knew what he meant when he called God Father. He made himself the Son of God. And, when he did these things, by being the Son of God, he does what he saw the Father do and what he participated in prior to his coming to earth. And so,
in me, I am in him.
yeah, that's part of it. So again, we see the controversy that is even here in John 5 is beginning to brew up, and all of these things are being collected by the Jewish leaders to use against Jesus, ultimately when they can find the right time and the right place. And throughout the book of John, many times Jesus uses a phrase, "My time has not yet come." Jesus knows that there is a time and there is a place that the Jewish leaders will take advantage of the situation when it comes to the time of his crucifixion. But many times we'll see in John's writing Jesus saying, "My time has not yet come. My time has not yet come. My time has not yet come." And then toward the end of his ministry, he says, "My time has come," or "the time has come." And so these are our events and circumstances as he battles with the Jewish leaders. Our time is up for this morning. Does anybody have any more comments or questions as we...
I got one quick comment and thought with the man, when Christ told him to sin no more, I wondered if he might have got offended just a little bit and then went to the...
Well, again, that's quite possible, that was Jesus accusing him of something? I mean, what did he mean by that? And so he seems like he beat a path. As soon as he knew who Jesus was, and after he talked with Jesus, he most certainly beat a path to the Jewish leaders to be more than willing to tell them it was Jesus. I kind of think of it as throwing him under the bus. We use a term, threw him under the bus. Well, this guy has pressure on him from the Jewish leaders, and so he finds out about Jesus, so he throws Jesus under the bus. And, the Jewish leaders are more than happy to move their attention from this man to Jesus because they're already focused on him. This man is inconsequential in the greater scheme of things. But Jesus, on the other hand, now that's a different story. And so they made themselves an enemy of him. And so, they were more than happy for the man to give up Jesus' name and move toward him.
Why not make this the day that you and your family seek out the Church of Christ in your community? We encourage you to attend one of our worship times or Bible studies. God's grace, truth, and salvation is truly worth finding and knowing. May God bless and keep you as we walk together in His truth. And remember, as always, the Churches of Christ salute you. Our new programs are posted to Facebook and YouTube on Thursday afternoon, and they should be available for viewing by 7 p.m. We also encourage our viewers to visit our website at www.thechurchesofchrist.life. We ask that you like us on Facebook and share our programs. On YouTube, please share and subscribe for notifications. This program was pre-recorded.